Hello and welcome to the Ultimate Blender tutorial for beginners. And in this tutorial, we will be covering everything you need to know to get started with Blender, the powerful open source 3D modeling and animation software. First, let's start with the basics. In this tutorial, we will be going over the following topics: setting up Blender, the Blender interface, basic modeling techniques, materials and textures, lighting and rendering, animation and rigging, tips and tricks for success in Blender. Before we get started, make sure you have downloaded and installed the latest version of Blender from the official website. Now, let's begin with setting up Blender. When you first open the software, you will be greeted with the default startup screen. From here, you can either create a new file or open an existing one. For now, let's create a new file by clicking the New button in the top left corner. Next, let's take a look at the Blender interface. The interface is made up of several different areas, each with its own specific purpose. The 3D viewport is where you will be spending most of your time, as it is where you will be able to view and manipulate your 3D models. On the right side of the screen, you will see the Properties panel, where you can adjust various settings for your models and scenes. On the left side, you will see the Tools panel, which contains a variety of tools for creating and editing your models. Now that you are familiar with the interface, let's move on to basic modeling techniques. In Blender, you can create 3D models using a variety of different methods, such as extruding, subdividing, and sculpting. In the 3D viewport, press T to open the toolbar on the left side of the screen. This toolbar contains a variety of tools that we can use for modeling. To create a basic 3D shape, let's select the Add menu at the bottom of the toolbar and choose Mesh from the list. This will bring up a variety of 3D shapes that we can add to our scene. Let's start by adding a cube to our scene. Click on the cube icon and then click and drag in the 3D viewport to place the cube in the scene. Now let's practice manipulating the vertices of the cube. To do this, switch to edit mode by pressing Tab on the keyboard. This will allow us to edit the individual vertices of the cube. To move a vertex, select it by left-clicking on it and then use the GE key to grab and move it. We can also scale a vertex by using the SE key or rotate it using the R key. To add more vertices to the cube, we can use the Subdivide tool, which can be found in the Mesh menu in the toolbar on the left. To delete a vertex, select it and press the X key. Then choose Vertices from the menu that appears. We can also use the Extrude tool to create new geometry from an existing vertex or face. To use this tool, select a vertex or face and press the EA key. These are just a few of the basic modeling techniques available in Blender. With practice and experimentation, you can learn to create a wide variety of 3D shapes and objects. I hope this helps get you started with modeling in Blender. Let me know if you have any questions or need further clarification on any of these techniques. Next, let's talk about materials and textures. Materials in Blender are used to give your models a realistic look and feel by adding color, reflexivity, and other properties to the surface. Textures are used to add even more detail to your materials, such as bump maps and normal maps. In this tutorial, we will be going over how to create and apply materials and textures to your models. To add a material to an object, select the object in the 3D viewport and then go to the Materials tab in the Properties panel on the right side of the screen. In the Materials tab, click the New button to create a new material for the object. To adjust the appearance of the material, we can use various properties such as the diffuse color, which controls the base color of the material, and the specular color, which controls the highlight color. We can also adjust the roughness of the material using the roughness slider, which controls how rough or smooth the surface appears. To add a texture to the material, click the Texture tab in the Properties panel. In the Texture tab, click the New button to create a new texture for the material. To add an image as the texture, click the Open button and select an image file from your computer. To adjust how the texture is applied to the material, we can use various properties such as the scale and offset values, which control the size and position of the texture on the material. We can also use the Mapping tab to control how the texture is projected onto the object. Now that we have covered materials and textures, let's talk about lighting and rendering. Lighting is an essential element in creating realistic 3D scenes as it helps to define the mood and atmosphere of your project. In Blender, you can create and adjust lights using the Properties panel and the 3D viewport. Rendering is the process of creating a final image or video from your 3D scene. In this tutorial, we will be going over how to set up and adjust lighting in your scenes, as well as how to render your final images and videos. In the 3D viewport, we can add a light source to our scene by going to the Add menu at the bottom of the toolbar and choosing Light from the list. There are several types of lights available in Blender, including point lights, spotlights, and sunlights. Each type of light has its own set of properties that we can adjust to control its appearance and behavior. To adjust the properties of a light, select it in the 3D viewport and go to the Object Data tab in the Properties panel on the right side of the screen. In the Object Data tab, we can adjust the color and intensity of the light using the color and energy sliders. We can also control the fall-off of the light using the distance and linear sliders, which determine how quickly the light fades as it travels away from the source. To set up a camera for rendering, go to the Add menu and choose Camera from the list. To adjust the properties of the camera, select it in the 3D viewport and go to the Object Data tab in the Properties panel. In the Object Data tab, we can adjust the focal length and lens shift of the camera using the focal length and shift sliders. To render an image of our scene, go to the Render tab in the Properties panel and click the Render button. In the Render tab, we can also adjust various rendering settings such as the resolution, the number of samples, and the output format. Finally, let's talk about animation and rigging. Animation in Blender is the process of creating movement and change in your 3D models and scenes. Rigging is the process of setting up a character or object for animation by adding bones and control systems. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and that you are now ready to start creating amazing 3D models and animations with Blender. Don't forget to check out our other tutorials for more tips and tricks on how to succeed in Blender. Thanks for watching.